GOMA. I'm from Zambia and from Lusaka. I work for a project called Profit. Profit is a US-led funded program. And it started in 2004. We only started to go out and do interventions in 2005. So right now, Profit is for people that don't come from Zambia, but for those that are from Zambia, I think we have heard a huge publicity about Profit and what it has done to improve the private sector. And it's perceived as a successful project. But I want to draw the crowd this evening to a different thing. How did we get to where we are? It hasn't been very rosy. I think people read our reports, they come to Profit, they say, oh, you guys are doing a great job. But it has not been that great. Because in 2005, when we started, I mean, after being interviewed, given the job, the package was good, the incentives were great, we were young, from university, just thinking we were going to change the whole industry. But we were just going to change Zambia. We started out and went out with our big books and talking to farmers about what we thought we were going to do. It's good, because we had all the energy, we had all the incentives waiting for us at a good pay, a vehicle and everything. So we were all out to do a good job, but it didn't work like that. In 2005, as a sector coordinator, I was supposed to help vets and farmers come up with an intervention that was going to help promote vet services. It worked well. We talked to the vets bought our idea. We talked to the farmers were saying, oh great, finally we're going to save our animals. And we said to the vets, you can sell this package and it will give you lots of money. But that package had one thing, farmers needed to pay for the vet service well in advance, a year in advance. 12 months in advance they pay for the services, and all the vet does is go in and do the services. And the first year, the first month, farmers signed up. Farmers paid. Some for 6 months. They didn't trust us enough to pay for a year, but they paid for 6 months. Some paid for a year. We had a good number join. But the following year, 2006, all those that had paid up didn't want to pay again. So we only had a few people want to buy that service. But did we stop? No, we went on saying this is the best solution for you. You need to buy this service, you need to keep your animals alive. If you're doing it all wrong, this is how you should do. 6 months later, we only had a few farmers again. Most of the farmers had dropped out of the package. And here we are. How do I go back and say it's not working? How do I go and tell my supervisor or go back to my quarterly report when I'm writing back to USID saying, oh, we're not getting the numbers, farmers are not buying our interventions? It was hard. We didn't want to do it. So we kept on pushing. It meant, personally on me, I was not doing enough. You're not going out in the field enough. You're not talking to the farmers enough. You're not having enough meetings. And I was also putting the pressure on the field staff because I was supervising a good number of field staff. I was putting the pressure on them. I was like, you're not going out, guys. You're not selling this thing. You're not talking to service providers. So another 2 years of pushing a service that farmers didn't want to buy. But we had a very good organization that they still kept telling us when we go out in the field, please come back to us and let us know that what is not working so that we can work on that. But because admitting that it's not working means I am a failure, you haven't done a good job. No one wanted to do it. So I would go out and still market it, come back. Still market it and come back. Until such a time that we really got problems from the supervisors. Why are we not getting the numbers? You guys have been this at this for 2 years and still vets are only 5 vets are paying for services. The vets that paid last year are not wanting to pay for it. Why is this happening? But when we came to the problem, and it has to be done very well, you need to have very good people because it's hard to tell them it's not working. Because they sign your paycheck. So you're thinking, if I say I'm not working, it's not working, my contract is up for renewal, am I going to get the job? So you're in the middle of like, should I tell them it's not working or should I pretend it's working and it's going to work if we push it more? But with that lesson, with that problem from the supervisor, we reached a stage where we say it's not working. Guys, we have failed. The farmers are just not buying this. It's not working for the service providers, it's not working for the vets. And it's only when we reached the stage when we were admitted that it's not working that we started to learn. Because all this time we were close to learning about what wasn't working, because we just thought this is the best thing. This is it. No one has any other solution than this. So only when we sat down and we say, guys, it's not working. Let us relook at this. Why are farmers not paying for the service? Why does the vet not still see this as a business? Why is it so hard for the farmer to come and pay for the service without us forcing him to do it? That's when we started to learn. And I want to say tonight, failure is painful to admit, and a lot of people that are in development work will put an intervention just because they need to keep the numbers on and they don't admit the report on the table. But sometimes, even though when they know it's not working, it's a very difficult thing to admit. So when we sat down and we looked at it and we asked the question, why is it not working? And then we started to look at other ways in which this intervention will still be rolled out to the farmers without it being a very difficult thing to buy. The first thing we had to look is, why are they not paying for it? We forgot that these communities were not commercially driven, they were trust driven. So the thought was, if I pay a vet for a year, is he going to come out and vaccinate my cattle? My money is going to go, so I'll lose out. So they were not paying because they just didn't trust that when they pay upfront, their money, and I would also not do it. I think we were asking too much from the farmers that have never met a vet to pay him for a year, a vet who comes from 400 kilometers away, and pay him for a year and you come in and do the services. So when we admitted that this is not fair, working, we looked at it, and then we sat down to redesign it. When we looked at the why it was not working, we broke down that package into individual services, and farmers buy as they want the service. So the farmer would buy the service that he needs at that particular time. We just saw the way they shifted. Farmers started to buy it, and now we're talking about thousands of dollars in sales to vet firms or vet service providers. That wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. So what I would like to say tonight is, a lot of donor-driven organizations, we have to answer to our donors, of course. Money is coming from somewhere. We're evaluated based on the numbers. What have we done with the $17 million that has been given to us? But also, this is a lesson to people that are implementing projects. They need to build in the organization a culture of learning, a culture to allow their staff to admit that this is not working. It needs to be a conducive environment. Because our supervisor, he was from somewhere else, but he made that environment available for us. He said, you guys, if it's not working, come back and tell us it's not working. We just didn't want to do it because we thought, oh, this is going to take my job away. But there was an incentive for us to come back and say, it's not working. And this is the lesson that a developmental organization needs to put in. They need to create the environment. They need to let their staff know that if it's okay to fail. It's okay to say this thing is not, it's not something that will work for this community. So that those staff come back and they tell them the truth and they're able to change that intervention. And now, between that same period, 2005 to 2010, we can safely stand out and say the farmers are able to buy the vet services from the vets without any of us going out and pushing them, because now it's working for them. And the vets are also able to do business with the farmers without feeling, oh, I'm being pushed to push the service to the farmer. And at the end of this, I want to say, failure is not the end. The worst thing is, you as an implementing organization, you fail and you do nothing about it. You fail and ask why. When you answer the why question, why is it not working? And look at other reasons, ways in which it could work. Get up and do it. Because if you fail and you say, it didn't work, so I'm just going to try anything else, something else, it won't help anyone. That's the lesson that I would like to let people know. Maybe some people have not been to Zambia, to Africa. It looks so easy. But if you're working there and you know that I need to keep this job, it's an environment that is very difficult to work in and say I'm not doing a good job. Thank you.
need to be heard more. But something is stopping it, and we need to do something about it. I've asked Ian Smiley to come up and talk about why we don't hear more of those voices and more of those stories.
When we were hearing this morning about Google, I remembered a book that I read a few years ago called The Victorian Internet. It's a book about the laying of the transatlantic telegraph cable in the 1850s. When the cable was laid, Queen Victoria sent a message to the President of the United States, who was waiting to receive it. There were fireworks, there were national holidays, there were special magazines, issues of newspapers, and all kinds of predictions about what this would mean to the world. All kinds of amazing predictions, but it would mean an end to ignorance, it would mean an end to poverty, and it would certainly mean an end to war, because people would be able to understand one another and be able to communicate very quickly, and all misunderstandings would be put aside. T.S. Eliot asked, where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we've lost in information? Where development is concerned, the international development enterprise has been consumed by fads that flash like comets across the aid system, gobbling huge amounts of intellectual and financial attention, often disappearing quickly without a trace. Integrated rural development, basic human needs, redistribution with growth, and a dozen others. Then came sustainability. The concept of sustainability is inherent in the idea of development, but the term itself was virtually absent from development writing until the mid-1980s. The word sustainability was used just 5 times in CEDA's expansive 1986 policy document, Sharing Our Future, and then only in the context of environmental development. Within 3 years, the vocabulary had changed, and the expression sustainable development was used 9 times alone in the President's 1-page preface to CEDA's 1990 annual report. To paraphrase Martin Amos, CEDA and the wider world of development assistance has been dominated by herds of cliches roaming free. By the 1990s, the list of priorities, themes, sectors, policies, strategies, cross-cutting issues, and cliches was becoming ever more complicated, and the complexity increased with the 1993 Auditor General's report, which said that one of CEDA's major challenges was its accountability in managing for results. When the Auditor General sneezes, government departments run for the Kleenex. And in the almost 20 years since then, results-based management has dominated, some might say tyrannized, the agency's systems and behavior and partners, although not with any clarity or consistency. Where effective development is concerned, as in any walk of life, the emphasis has to be on learning what works and what doesn't work. Information is all very well, but it's not enough. Knowledge and information are not the same thing. Knowledge comes from experience, evaluation, learning, and application. Imagine Thomas Edison's experiments with the light bulb. He invests a lot of time and money, but the first experiments fail. So he moves on to experiment with a phonograph, forgetting all about the light bulb, because his investors have no tolerance for failure. So he has to pretend to have been successful and quickly move on to other things. So we never actually get a workable light bulb or even a workable phonograph, because after a few more failures, he's now working on a motion picture machine. In fact, Edison had many failures, and he thought about it a lot, and I looked this up on the internet. He said, I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. I'm not discouraged, because every wrong attempt discarded is another step forward. Many of life's failures are men who didn't realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Nearly every man who develops an idea works at it up to the point where it looks impossible and then gets discouraged. That's not the place to become discouraged. And finally, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Ending poverty is not easy. If we knew how to create a lot of jobs for very poor people, we would have done it a long time ago. The problem is not failure, it's the failure to learn from failure. It's the punishment and suppression of failure, the inability to read and think and remember in a political economy that talks a good line on poverty reduction, but actually puts it pretty far down an agenda that's overloaded with commercial and strategic interests. So we wind up with no light bulbs, no phonographs, and no motion pictures. The poets got it right. Robert Browning said, "A minute's success pays the failure of years." And Keats said, "I was never afraid of failure, for I would sooner fail than not be among the greatest." Thank you.
Obviously the necessity for us on a systemic level for us to be able to admit the failure. But the system is actually quite against us for doing it, or the incentives aren't really there for us to be able to do it. So if we really want to change it, we need people who believe in the necessity to admit it, to take action first. I'm going to ask Scott Gilmore, he's the executive director and the founder of a really innovative organization called Peace Dividend Trust. He's recently released their own failure report, and I'm just going to ask him to come up and talk a little bit about putting that into action.
You're in fantastic luck tonight. The doors of my plane close in 57 minutes, which means I'm going to have to paraphrase this and then run out of here. Give me a very quick speech from me. You know, the first time I heard the phrase failure report, saw the words failure report, was on Twitter. Somebody was saying, oh, this Canadian NGO has just put this failure report, isn't this weird? I clicked on it, and instantly, three distinct thoughts went through my brain in rapid succession. One was, this is genius. Two was, damn it, that EWB ball has done it again. And three was, we need to steal this idea immediately. And let me explain those three thoughts and why they happen. It's genius because the moment you see the words failure report, the moment you open up the first page of the EWB failure report, you instantly understand what it is, why it makes sense, and you ask yourself, why haven't we been doing this for 50 years? It was an idea that was waiting to be discovered, and it took you guys to do it. And I was going to say several things about why we need the failure reports, but I think Ian summed it up perfectly. The problem is not failure, but the failure to learn from failure. And what the failure reports are doing, are trying to tackle that issue specifically. And my second reaction was, naturally, of course, it would come from EWB. You know, when I decided to leave the Foreign Service and quite ridiculously start a charity, the very first person I called to talk to and get advice from was Parker Mitchell. And it's because that in an industry, the aid industry, that I believe is very fearful of change and very suspicious of innovation, that has all sorts of mechanisms inbuilt to reward successive failures, I see EWB as being a real standout. Engineers Without Borders is one of those organizations where innovation thrives, where difficult questions are asked. And so while PT tends to look for new ideas from outside of the aid industry, from the private sector, from the public sector, and from science and the arts, we make an exception for EWB. So I was perfectly happy to steal this idea, which was in my third point. I immediately called my deputy in New York and I said, we're issuing a failure report. And I could actually hear her groan on the other side. But I sent her the link. She called me back and she said, this makes perfect sense. We talked to our managers. To my delight, they all agreed. And we began to put parameters together for how we were going to do our own failure report. And it occurred to me, though, in that process, you know what? Failure starts at the top. And the first failure report should be coming from my desk before I ask my colleagues in places like Kandahar or Port-au-Prince to publicly put forward their shortcomings. So I rapidly put together, you know, what ended up being a fairly long list of failures. Who knew? I should have. And I circulated circulated amongst my staff. They agreed. The change they said is, wait a second, it's not just about the failures, it's importantly about what we're going to do to fix them. So we added in all the changes we were going to make in response to these failures. We put it up on our blog and circulated to our staff, and literally within 15 minutes, I had a dozen emails, Twitter DMs, and a few phone calls, all universally supported, including from a few donors. I had one very concerned board member ask me, is this sort of thing done? And I assured him, well, no, but the donors are happy. And so we've continued to do it. When we took the failure report and the recommendations that we came up with, we compared them to our annual business plan, and then we made sure that the actions that we intend to take are built right into the work plans and the deliverables of our individual managers. Will it work? Is it going to make PDT a better organization? It's too soon to tell. We'll see what Failure Report 2.0 says. You know, if it bears a striking resemblance to the one that we put up a few months ago, we've got a problem. But I'm hopeful that it will help us become a better organization. And what I'm really looking forward to is that EWB is now taking the lead, not just in Canada, but more broadly, to take this idea out into the aid industry and to share it and encourage others to take this up as a real concrete step for us to make the world a better place. And I just found out from Twitter about 15 minutes ago that this year at Davos, at the great annual meeting of the captains of industry, for the first time ever, they have a panel on failure. And I know for a fact it's because of EWB, and I'll tell you how I know that. I was in Geneva, Parker, a few months ago, speaking to a mutual friend of ours, Robert Friedman. I was raving about your failure report. Robert had all sorts of questions, and so Robert, being the managing director of the World Economic Forum, put it on the agenda at Davos. So the ideas that you started here in Toronto are already spreading around the world. So congratulations! I think everybody here deserves it.
And he talks about the necessity to continue to criticize outside, but he also mentions that before he does that, he wants to make sure PDT continues to be critical of themselves first. And I thought that was something that was really, really powerful, and I think that's something that should resonate with us, and I just want to acknowledge that's a really resonate and amplify the fact that these individuals who have contributed the story have taken individual responsibility for the failures that are there. Let me get off that tangent and back onto where we were now, which is, I'm just going to bring Ashley Breeside up to let you know about what we really do want to do and take the innovation that started with Nick, one of our volunteers out in Africa, that was grown through more volunteers picking that idea up, and now obviously having some ripple in on the global stage, how we want to be able to create a broader platform that will allow more people to admit failure and to learn from them and to improve.
So I want to start by thanking Trinity, Ian, and Scott for the wonderful stories. I'm really excited to be standing up here with you today because I get to launch an exciting new project, and it is called admittingfailure.com. Now, this is a website for development practitioners at all levels of the sector to voluntarily report on their own failures. I think you'll agree after hearing our speakers that admitting failure has a huge potential to improve the development sector. And through charity, we saw how having a culture and the space to fail can lead to innovation on the ground. Ian talked about the bigger impact to the whole sector, and Scott talked about what this meant for his organization and actually driving that change from the management level and driving that culture change. Now, I'd like to start this launch of this failure website with a little activity. I'd like you to take a second and think to yourself, and think of your work, and think of that failure that made you stand up at the beginning of this session. And instead of just standing up, I want you to find somebody around you, whether someone at your table, someone at another table, but just someone you might not know all that well. And I want you in 30 seconds to summarize that failure vote and tell them about your failure. And just go, don't be shy. Turn to your neighbor and tell them what that failure was that made you stand up. Outside of an EWB conference, you would have been pretty hesitant to introduce yourself to a stranger by telling them about a mistake you made. So, congratulations to everybody in the room for taking that step. Now, how do you think you managed to overcome that hesitation to admit failure publicly? I'm going to guess that it had something to do with the fact that everyone else in the room was also opening up about their failures. And to me, this is what this website is about. It's about creating a community of people all admitting and learning from failure. So it's a safe place for like-minded development practitioners who are really pushing the boundaries, trying new things, innovating and failing, but learning from these failures and sharing these failures with others. So everyone in this room is a role model and is leading the way to this change by being critical of ourselves, not placing the blame, but really looking at our own failures, and by doing so, admitting failure into the development sector as a whole. Now, I'll be the first to admit this site is still in the works. It's a long way to go before it reaches its full potential. And who knows, this might end up as the first submission to next year's failure report. Regardless of that risk, I'm still planning to set some pretty lofty goals. So in 1 year's time, I would like to see 100 self-reflective, honest, admitted failures up on this site. I I'd also like to set the goal of encouraging donors, such as Global Giving, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Rockefeller, and a bunch of other great organizations that are represented at this conference, to show their support for admitting failures. Now, one of my first conversations about this website, when it was still just an idea, was with John Hecklinger of Global Giving. And he said to me on the phone, he said, if you fail and you're transparent about it, it builds trust. He subsequently became the first non-EWB submission to the website. So the shift is happening. Donors are recognizing and building trust with organizations that admit and learn from their failures. So I encourage everyone in this room to start rethinking development. Try something new. Start creating the change you want to see in the sector. And while you're at it, you're all invited to post any failures you have along the way to admittingfailures.com.
We have a small glitch, as Ashley mentioned. We're just going to fix the link for us to be able to, for people just to be able to email the submission in. So just in case you're furiously typing away on failures right now, you have a little while for us to be able to post that up. I think I'm just going to wrap up this launch. 2 launches, the admittingfailure.com site. This is for the broader community. I want to just wrap this back up for reminding us of our own failure report. This failure report is, yes, it's being accessed outside, and it is important for other people to be able to read about it. But let us not forget that this is about us first. An organization that is trying to rally around people who believe a better system of development support for better development impact is possible. We need to look internal. Just as Scott has said, we need to be able to first criticize ourselves before we are going to look external. And I'm going to just close on a simple, on a phrase that Tim Rod had opened the conference with yesterday. And he was talking about sometimes we ask ourselves, are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution? And I'm just going to remind you with something he said about this. He said, unless you see yourself as part of the problem, you have no right to be part of the solution. Keep learning, keep trying, keep failing, and more important, when you do fail, keep having the courage to get up and take action again.